All right, how you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Lots of games this week. So this
Yeah,
is this is a
Big week.
deciding week. Big
It's
week.
a big week. Big week.
pivotal week for the season-long standings, to be sure.
I believe two games separate first and third right now. So good week, you could be in first. A bad week could be tough.
Recording in progress.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in to Go with the Flow, presented by RS Andrews. I'm Brandon. Let me see if I can get this camera a little bit better. There we go. Now look a little bit better. This is a little bit haphazard. Nonetheless, glad to have you here for Go with the Flow, presented by RS Andrews this week. Big slate of games to pick. We've got the entire Dog Nation team on hand to be able to do that. Mike Griffith, Connor Riley, Jeff Sintel, also our buddy Dari Payroll from RS Andrews is on hand there as well. And it's the deepest slate of games we probably picked all season long. Double-digit picks for us. I don't think we've done that very much this year, but almost everybody in the SEC in action against conference foes, and a handful of games involving a couple of, actually 3 different leagues have top 25 matchups this week. So there is a lot to talk about with all of that. Also, it's a fun time to take a peek at our season-long standings, and the race to the top is certainly getting pretty tight here. In fact, before we explain the rules of our game, let's give you a chance to see these standings. You see Connor Riley standing right now on top for the season-long number. He's 46-35 on the year, but tied with me last week. And right now, I'm just a game behind Connor in terms of the year-long race here. Both 5-3 a week ago. Connor 46-35 so far. Me 45-36. Just after that, and knocking on the door, not too far behind, Dari Peiro after a 3-5 week last week. He's 44-37 on the campaign. Then Mike and Jeff both 3-5 last week. That puts them at just under 500 on the season, but nonetheless, anything can happen in the days to come, including a day like this when we have, as I said before, 11 total games to pick and fun to be had all the way around there. And of course, if you've never joined us here before I'll go with the flow presented by RS Andrews, here's how it plays out. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers also have a chance to weigh in. Folks make their picks for the big games for the upcoming weekend against the spread. And after that, a consensus is formed. And then Dari Peiro from RS Andrews gets to decide if he wants to go with the flow, join the consensus on that pick. We invite you to do the same thing. And of course, I'll be mixing my picks in there as well. Fun times here for sure. Dari Peiro, before we get going, how you feel about the week here with action really for the first time in a while, some pretty big games outside the SEC. How do you feel about this week's card?
Pretty good. I mean, there's definitely some games I feel better than others. This is definitely that time of year that some of these games are tricky. They're testers to pick. A lot of games on the slate this weekend.
For sure. And so that means we'll try to keep things moving here today, picking a lot of games. In fact, let's start what we always do with the Georgia Bulldogs, this time on the road for the first time in November since the schedule changed from a couple of years ago. They go to Neyland Stadium, expected to be cold, temperatures in the 40s as a high, could be into the 30s before the game is over with. And also, speaking of highs, Tennessee's offensive performance has been certainly high as of late, including last week, odd box score against Kentucky when the Vols got back to their winning ways and scored more than 40 points in a victory in a game which Tennessee actually had the football for fewer than 14 minutes. So this is an explosive offense that doesn't need time of possession to churn out points. And last week was an example of that. Of course, for Georgia, you know the story by now. Number one with a bullet, 43-6 last week against Missouri. And very little debate right now as to who the best team in the country has been. But are they due for a test? Let's find out with the Vols catching 20 at home. Mike Griffith, give us a start.
Yeah, well, full disclosure, this is the only game that I've really studied closely. The number one team takes a lot of attention, and I think this Georgia team is special. And although I do think Tennessee could offer some early resistance, I think Georgia's going to cover that 20-point spread.
So Mike's on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs, also possibly a little bit of excuse making for the losing record that's matriculated over the last couple of weeks, but I'll just leave that alone all the way around. Jeff, what do you think? Georgia giving 20 at Neyland Stadium.
Smarmy, guys. We're all smarmy today. I remember, Brandon, when your record wasn't so pretty, you were like, I'm seeing the board good. I got a good feeling about this. I'm seeing the board good.
And it turns out I was right when I said that.
Oh, yeah, a clock's right twice a day, too. A clock is right twice a day, too, Brandon. I will say this is a big – I think this is a 20, 25-point spread. I think it's something like the South Carolina game. I think Georgia takes this around 23, 25 points. That means give me Georgia and the points.
So far, a lot of love for the Dogs. Connor Riley, what do you think? 20 is a lot of points.
Yeah, so I'd look back to the Florida and Alabama games where Tennessee was able to hang with those teams for a half, maybe even the third quarter there, but they just don't have the horses to hang up over the course of 4 quarters. However, I'm going to zag even farther here. I don't think this is going to be a competitive game. I think Georgia comes out early, hits this Tennessee team in the mouth, scores early, scores often, wins big on Saturday. So give me the Dogs minus 20.
Connor Riley joins the rest of the fray with the Scribes there. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, they feel the same way. 92% like Georgia to cover the 20-point number. And Connor mentions the Tennessee's actually failed to cover in both of its big opportunities this season to be an underdog. Close against Alabama for a while, but ultimately Alabama hung the 25-point spread there. Florida did the same thing with a 19-point spread earlier this season. So Tennessee's by no means a sure thing when a big underdog. 4-5 in total against the spread thus far this season. But you know what? I'm still kind of playing a hunch here on this, that for me, it's virtually impossible to go through an entire 11-game run without playing one game at least somewhat close. Georgia was obviously close week 1 against Clemson and hasn't been challenged since then. I feel like they are, to a degree, somewhat due for that. I also think styles make fights. And as I mentioned before, Tennessee doesn't need the ball very much to find a way to be explosive. To me, this adds up to a scenario: hostile crowd, cold weather. I think Tennessee keeps it inside this number, maybe even against what the data would suggest as a possibility here. So I will go against the flow and take the Vols here plus the 20. Dar, you want to join me on that island, or you want to go with the flow and take UGA?
No, I'm going to go with the flow, taking Georgia. I think they're just going to be able to control the clock, and Tennessee won't be able to stop the running game.
So that is straight to the point there for Dari Payro. A lot of love for the Georgia Bulldogs, which no doubt dog fans certainly enjoy. And obviously, we'll turn our attention back to UGA before we're done here on Go with the Flow here today. Of course, big reminder that the same way we keep the picks flowing, RS Andrews can keep it flowing in your house there as well, whether it be the heat that comes out of your vents this time of year. I know it's been cold at night. My family definitely wants good, warm temperatures inside our house, and that's what RS Andrews can help you with and get that furnace tuned back up to factory fresh specs for you. So if you're worried about the winter, if you're worried about being cold, well, RS Andrews can keep that from happening. They'll get you tuned back up to factory fresh specs on that heating system. So find them online today at rsandrews.com. All right, next game to pick around the SEC before coming back to Georgia before it's all said and done. Let's go to Mississippi State going to Auburn. Mississippi State lost last week in a thrilling game to Arkansas, marred a bit by what I thought was kind of a classless comment from Mike Leach once the game was over with, but nonetheless, trying to get back on the horse this week. Auburn also doing the same thing after losing at Texas A&M last week. Of course, Jordan-Hare Stadium has been a place where the Tigers have been pretty strong this season. The game against Georgia a few weeks ago notwithstanding. Auburn finds itself as a 5.5-point favorite here at home, almost the same mark by which they were an underdog on the road last week against Texas A&M. So back here at Jordan-Hare on the Plains. Mike, what do you think about Auburn as a 5.5-point favorite against Mississippi State?
Yeah, it's a tough game, BA, but I'm going to go with the Auburn because of the home field advantage. Mississippi State's got a great run defense, and it was a heartbreaking loss, and Mike Leach is a jerk. So give me Auburn to win and cover the spread.
Good to have Mike there with me on that. Jeff Sintel, how about you? Auburn minus 5.5.
So it's at Jordan-Hare. It's a noon kickoff, I believe. Mississippi State's passing game is starting to really click and fire on all cylinders. I just don't believe in Mississippi State at Jordan-Hare. I think that line's not large enough for me at 5.5. I think Auburn wins this game by about 13 points. Give me the Tigers, lay the points.
A lot of love for Auburn right now. Connor, what do you think?
Nope. I'm going to take Mississippi State here again. They've been very good to me the last couple of weeks. I love what I've seen out of Will Rogers there. Did just enough to cover last week. Maybe should have won that game, given they were up there in the second half. So I like Mississippi State here. I don't think this Auburn team is a good matchup for them. And while they do play better at home, I sort of like what I've seen out of Mississippi State as a football team, Mike Leach's comments notwithstanding.
So believe it or not, 55% of Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers actually joined Connor on that pick of Mississippi State. Maybe that's an anti-Auburn thing. Hard to tell there a little bit, but they're on the side of Mississippi State. And it is important to know that, and I'll get to the Auburn part of this in a moment. We talk about Auburn at home and how good they've been. Fair to point out, Mississippi State has been very strong on the road under Leach. Remember, they got the cover last week, even in the outright loss to Arkansas. That's 3 straight Mississippi State has covered on the road. They've also covered in 5 of their last 6 instances on the road there as well. So they're no problem for them when it comes to playing well on the road. But Auburn is just an entirely different team coming back home. They've covered in 12 of their last 14 as a favorite there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. That's the spot they find themselves once again on Saturday. And until that streak breaks, then I'm going to keep with that. I like the edge here for Auburn. I like the trend here for Auburn there as well. So I'll go with the Tigers. That puts the flow just slightly on the side of Auburn. Dar, you want to go with the flow here and take the Tigers?
Yeah, I'm going to take Auburn at home, even though Mississippi State's been playing a lot of their games pretty close and finding a way to keep it close with probably like 3 or 4 point type losses. I think Auburn at home is just it's going to do enough to cover that 5.5.
So very good pick there. Let's keep it going here in the SEC. Missouri fresh off getting its first cover of the season last week, albeit in a blowout loss to Georgia, gets a chance to come back home to Farragut Field there in Columbia and take on the team that represents the other Columbia in the SEC, this being South Carolina. Of course, by now, folks are aware of what the Gamecocks did a week ago, dominating the Florida Gators and having plenty of fun on social media when it was done, and really bringing an end to a lot of the reputation for Florida coach Dan Mullen, forced to make a move against two of his assistants after that game was done. But can the Gamecocks stay riding high as they go back on the road? Bet US would say no. Missouri, believe it or not, here is actually a 1-point favorite, even though Gamecocks seem to have a lot going for them here at the moment. So, Mike Griffith, we'll start with you. What do you think about Missouri at home against South Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, I know South Carolina might have beat Florida more impressively than Georgia did, but I'm not drinking that Kool-Aid. You know, I think that had a lot to do with Florida. This is a road trip, and Missouri, you know, if not for a fourth down pass, Georgia's losing to Missouri at home in the first quarter, which is just blows my mind that game was close for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, almost 15 minutes. I'm going to take Missouri here, Brandon. I saw some things out of those Missouri quarterbacks that I liked. I know Kirby was down on his defense, but I liked the Missouri running back, and I thought both of their quarterbacks were very talented. So I'm going to take Missouri in this one.
So, Mike, on the side of the Tigers, 1-point home favorites against South Carolina. Jeff Sintel, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you got Bazelak still maybe not certain for this week as the starter. I see a lot of run game for South Carolina. You got Zaquandre Wright. You got obviously Kevin Harris. They got another very talented young running back coming up as well. I like South Carolina in this one. I think they will get it done. Run travels on the road. I'm not quite certain what Missouri has. I think that stout defensive effort against Georgia was basically the sellout against the run. I don't think they'll apply the same principles. I like South Carolina.
Split decision here so far. Connor, break the tie.
Love South Carolina here. You look at the way teams have played after playing Georgia, Kentucky, Arkansas, Florida. It took them a couple of weeks to get their bearings underneath them. I think you could see something similar with Missouri this week. And that South Carolina team really impressed me a week ago. Obviously, we talked about on here the quit factor when it came to Florida, but I really like what I saw out of South Carolina. And this is probably South Carolina's best chance at clinching a bowl victory or a bowl berth. I think they know that. I think they're aware of that. And I think they're going to do that on Saturday, beating Missouri in Columbia.
82% of Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers also on the side of South Carolina there as well. And boy, I couldn't disagree more. I think one of the real keys in a gambling contest or just actually making games to make some money, put some money in your pocket, you've got to be willing to stick and move. Love South Carolina a week ago against Florida, but I'm ready to move on right now. I mentioned Missouri being a bad team, earning a cover against the spread for just the first time last week. Connor's point about the week after playing Georgia, that's not been kind of team so far this year. But it's also an idea of huge environment, Williams-Brice Stadium, going on the road the following week. Boy, the vibe, the feeling completely different for that. And if you're interested, South Carolina's failed to cover in each of its last two road games, a 19.5-point spread against Texas A&M, a 10.5-point spread against Tennessee, on the wrong side of the cover in both of those relatively sizable losses. I don't think things have changed that much for the Gamecocks simply on the basis of blowing out Florida. In fact, I think the price here is probably a little high on South Carolina for what it is. So I like Missouri a lot, which is a strange thing to say in a year which Missouri's been so bad, but I do like them a bunch. However, the flow is on the side of South Carolina. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the suddenly hot Gamecocks?
No, or yeah, actually, I'm going to take the Gamecocks here. I'm going to take a flyer on them. I think they'll carry that momentum. If they win here, they become bowl eligible. So I like them to get it done.
So there you go on that. Probably biggest game of the day in the SEC. It's certainly the spot for ESPN College Game Day on Saturday. It is Ole Miss coming back home to the Grove and getting a chance to host Texas A&M. A&M leaving the friendly confines of Kyle Field after getting the win against Auburn last week. Ole Miss feeling good about itself, earning a relatively comfortable win against Liberty, although the second half was a little tighter than the first half. But nonetheless, Ole Miss got the win, the cover against Hugh Freeze a week ago, and now sees themselves getting 2.5 points here at home on Saturday against Ole Miss. So the Grove, you're going to expect going to have a nice crowd there for that one. And Vaught-Hemingway Stadium trying to be tough on the Aggies on Saturday. Mike, what do you think about Ole Miss getting 2.5 at home?
Yeah, I don't know that I think that's much as much of a home field advantage as some places in the SEC. And A&M's playing really good football, so I'm going to take A&M to cover here.
To Mike's point, and this has got nothing to do with nothing, but I was actually shocked at how few people there were at the game last Saturday against Liberty. So a little bit of a surprising small crowd last week for the Flames coming to town. So he might be on that. And Mike, I believe I heard you say your pick is A&M here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Jeff, what do you think? The number is 2.5.
Yeah, Brandon, this is one of those picks where I hear your gambling vernacular kick in about that's 2.5 is showing a lot of leg right there for Ole Miss. I think Texas A&M is playing great football. I think they've been great against the run. They've got momentum since the Alabama game. I think they're going to win this game comfortably. Give me Texas A&M in this one.
So both of the scribes on A&M thus far. Connor Riley, what do you think?
I push back on the idea that A&M is playing great football right now. Do we know how many touchdowns offensively they scored last week?
Georgia shows us you don't have to have a great offense to be playing great football, Connor.
0. They scored 0 touchdowns last week. I'm still going to take them here because I think their physical brand of football is going to do enough to win there, and Ole Miss is still pretty banged up. And as Mike can confirm, Liberty was sniffing around for a backdoor last week and just couldn't quite get there. So I'm going to take Texas A&M here, but I'm pumping the brakes a little bit that this Texas A&M team is great. Score an offensive touchdown, and then we can talk.
Definitely a tale of two halves in Oxford last week. No doubt about that whatsoever. 62% of Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers on the side of Texas A&M here there as well. And I'm going to push back on Connor's pushback as far as how A&M is performing. Pretty clearly this is not an explosive offensive team, nor do I think that's what Jimbo Fisher wants from this team right now. But if you go back and look, A&M's covered 9 of its last 13 in SEC play. It's actually covered 6 of its last 8. Listen to this. We've also covered 4 straight. So what you clearly see is a moment a year ago in which the light started coming on for what Jimbo Fisher, Mike Elko want for this program. A&M's been playing better since then, including a conclusion of 6 of 8, and now 4 straight in SEC play thus far in 2021. I think this gives you an idea. This is an A&M team that's really figuring it out. Not very many teams could lose a starting quarterback and eventually right the ship to the degree that A&M has. The early season losses to teams like Arkansas, Mississippi State, that is well in the rearview mirror right now. I think on Saturday, A&M goes out and asserts itself once again. Keep in mind here, though, that if you're on the fence, that there is a plus 50% winning percentage for teams who are favored by 2.5 in comparison to teams favored by 3. But nonetheless, in this particular case, we're going to take A&M minus the points here. That puts the flow on the side of A&M there as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Aggie?
No, I don't. I'm gonna take a flyer with Ole Miss here at home. I think they just have too much offense for A&M. A&M did a good job against Alabama. They're gonna have to play that type of game to try to slow down Ole Miss. I think this game is really going to be won by whichever team can establish their style of tempo in the first half, and I believe that's going to be Ole Miss controlling the tempo of this game.
Don't disagree with that at all. Should be quite, or at least I don't disagree with the premise, even if we're on the wrong side of the pick. Next game in the SEC, if you want to call it that, Vanderbilt gets a chance to host Kentucky, 21-point home underdogs. The Kentucky team last week that was in a wild shootout with Tennessee, and although the result wasn't what you wanted to be if you're a Wildcats fan, certainly it was a return to form for a Kentucky offense that had really played pretty miserably in the weeks prior to that. So can that keep going in Nashville on Saturday? The number is 21. Mike Griffith, what do you think?
I can't say what I think. I'd get thrown off the air. Vanderbilt's program makes me want to curse and say expletives because it's just such a crappy program. That's the strongest word I think I can say that's socially acceptable. I wouldn't touch this game with a 10-foot pole. These guys, you never know when they're going to show up. They don't care about football at Vanderbilt, but the moment I pick against them, they decide they want to show up and play games. So begrudgingly, I'll take Kentucky. I'll count on Vanderbilt to be Vanderbilt. And I think Kentucky, they did lose a tough game last week. And I think they're more than 3 touchdowns better than Vanderbilt. So I'm going to take Kentucky.
So Mike's on the side of the Wildcats, getting back to some form of its winning ways after a tough loss to Tennessee a week ago. Jeff, the number's 21. What do you think here?
Yeah, I don't know if Vanderbilt's going to score 3 points in this game. So really this is a question for me of do I think Kentucky can get to 25 points? That answer is yes. Lay the points. Give me Kentucky.
So a lot of love for the Wildcats thus far and BBN. Connor, what do you think?
Fading Vanderbilt every week. This is a week. I am fading Vanderbilt. Give me Kentucky here, minus 21.
Obviously, Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers say the same thing here. It's all Kentucky thus far, 81% on the side of the Wildcats. And I'm going to join that there as well. Now, it's worth pointing out that Vanderbilt did cover the spread in its last SEC game at home, obviously against a Missouri team that's turned out not to be very good. But beyond that, I think that Vanderbilt is actually a fairly easy team to predict. They're worth a look on the road when getting a big number. They've sometimes stood up in that scenario. But for the most part, they lay down and die at home when an underdog of 2 touchdowns or more. That's a scenario in this spot there on Saturday. I actually did take some comfort in the idea that Kentucky did play better offense a week ago against Tennessee, albeit in a losing effort. They were 5 of 5 in the red zone. They were 12 of 17 on third down. Will Levis played probably a better game than he's played in 6 weeks. So from that standpoint, I don't feel great about this. I certainly wouldn't bet my own money on it, but as far as a season-long contest, I think Kentucky's a fairly easy play here. Dari, it's a clean sweep on the side of the Wildcats. You want to go with the flow and take Kentucky.
Yeah, break out the broom. I'm gonna be part of that sweep. I'm taking Kentucky here. I think they're gonna take some of their frustrations out of losing last week on Vandy this week.
All right, so we turn our attention now to the SEC West, where LSU, after almost shocking the world and staying with Alabama for the entirety of the 60 minutes a week ago and having a chance to actually win that game outright at the end, and I think for a while, I guess I probably thought they were going to. They come back home against an Arkansas team that suddenly finds itself in the college football playoff top 25, sneaking in at the number 25 spot this week after holding on and getting a win against Mississippi State a week ago when they're at Death Valley. LSU's a 2.5-point home underdog. Boy, I'm going to talk about, why Ed Orgeron's the lame duck coach. How many times this year have we already talked about LSU as a home underdog? That almost never happens, but it's happened frequently this year, this time against Arkansas and what is, I guess, the battle for the Golden Boot. We should point that out. 2 teams that once played very frequently on the Friday after Thanksgiving. Now just another regular season game, but nonetheless, it's LSU plus 2.5 at home against Arkansas. What do you think, Mike Griffin?
Yeah, LSU, another one of those tough teams to figure. Boy, when they decide to show up, they're good. They showed you that against Alabama. They won at Mississippi State. They scored 49 points on a Florida defense that, Georgia struggled against, frankly. I'm going to take LSU to win this game, though, and cover, as much because I question Arkansas's ability to sustain after an emotional win that clinches a bowl victory. It's almost like, we got over the hump, and now LSU has the Golden Boot trophy they're playing for. So I'll take LSU in another one of these games that, again, I would never invest a dime in betting on this game.
I agree with a lot of what Mike says there. I think LSU is probably the most difficult team to predict, if not in the entire SEC, the entire country, perhaps. And certainly that continues again this Saturday there as well. Also, Mike's appearance brought to you by Norfolk Southern, as it sounds like he's broadcasting on the back of a freight train. But nonetheless, we're just glad he's with us. Jeff, what do you think about Arkansas and LSU?
Yeah, guys, a lot of bizarro teams in the SEC. I would put like a Mississippi State. I would put obviously LSU. Sometimes a lot of the rest of the conference in there as well. To me, I just think this comes down to being in Baton Rouge. I think Death Valley has an edge here. I think the number is 2.5. I'm not scared of that. I liked how LSU was basically pulling all the stops. I saw something where they blitz about everything they possibly could against Alabama last week. That shows me that they're really just trying to win and just trying to say heck with it all. I think that type of attitude will be enough to get them by the Fighting Pittmans. Give me LSU.
So a lot of LSU love here thus far, which is not quite what I would have expected. Connor Riley, what do you think?
Yes, sir. We're going to ride with the Hogs this week. LSU, an emotional game last week against Alabama. We know sort of the body blow theory and how that might factor into this. I know Arkansas played an emotional game a week ago, but I think Sam Pittman wants to continue to make a statement in this season. If he can win this game, he's got a real good chance of getting to 8, maybe 9 wins with a bowl game there. So I like Arkansas here. You wonder where this LSU team might be week to week. They were really good last week, and that means I think they might be due for a little bit of a letdown this week.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, 77% on the side of Arkansas, as Connor alluded to with the yes, sir. They still love Sam Pittman. That's what you get. And, I keep predicting LSU to quit, or at least I keep banking picks on the assumption that LSU is going to quit on the season. They just haven't. Depleted roster, and this is a team that quit a year ago before Ed Orgeron got fired. So you'd assume they would have quit after he got fired, but they haven't. Didn't against Florida. Didn't last Saturday against Alabama, but I guess I'm going to try this one more time with the belief that LSU just simply doesn't show up to play. Maybe more likely to be the case after you almost beat Alabama. How do you get back up again after that? Plus, there's a little bit of a physical beatdown once you play the Crimson Tide that Connor kind of alluded to there as well. So I keep going back to this well. It keeps being wrong each and every time. I'm going to do it one more time. I will take Arkansas on the road here, perhaps against my better judgment. But at some point in time, I just think LSU is due to lay down and die. Maybe it happens against an Arkansas team that continues to be well coached on both sides of the ball. So I'll take the Hogs. However, that actually puts the flow on the side of Arkansas as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Arkansas?
It's always tough to go against LSU as a home dog, but I'm running back with Sam Pittman. He owes me after missing with him the past few picks. So I'm expecting him to get the cover and the win here on the road.
So that is Dari Payro. And then, of course, from R.S. Andrews, Dari knows a lot about picking games, but he also knows a ton as well about what's going on with your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, electric needs there in your house. Dari Payro can take good care of you on all of that. The rest of the team at R.S. Andrews can do the same thing for you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what you can trust R.S. Andrews to do for you there as well. You can check them out today, and they will take good care of you. All right, let's turn our attention now to another game. Actually, that's it for SEC play. So we're going to step out now and do something we have not done much this year. There have not been, in a number of weeks, very many games involving top 25 opponents outside the SEC. But this week, we have 3 different conferences that provide a game of that magnitude. So let's start in the Big 12, where Oklahoma, a fresh off an off week a week ago, and a fresh off remaining at number 8 in the college football playoff top 25, 2 consecutive weeks. Dar, are you okay? Hopefully everything's okay with Dari there. He looks like he's going to go find another place to be. Are you okay, Dari? I don't think you can hear me. But nonetheless, it's Oklahoma going to the banks of the Brazos River there in Waco, Texas, to take on the Baylor Bears. Baylor, a 5.5-point home underdog here against an Oklahoma team that suddenly feels like it's got a lot to play for, and suddenly trying to showcase Caleb Williams and what could end up being a late season push for Heisman Trophy for the Oklahoma quarterback. Sooners and Bears, what do you think, Mike Griffith? The number here is 5.5.
I'm going to take Oklahoma. Again, out of conference game, only a pretty shallow review. The facts here, as much as I like the Baylor program, Dave Aranda, I think Oklahoma's got momentum. So I'm going to take Oklahoma to win and cover.
So that is Mike Griffith on the side of the Sooners. Jeff Sintel, what do you think?
Yeah, so many games going through here. I don't even feel like we've seen Dari crack his beverage open yet. So I think that maybe that's what we're waiting on for. Dari's going to go get him a beverage, but I just know this. I actually did some research on this one game this week because I really had no earthly idea. Besides saying great things about Caleb Williams, I went back to this number. I found out that Oklahoma is 18-2 on the road over its last 20 road games. They probably only play on the road in conference unless they're at a neutral site. Give me Oklahoma. Give me another banner reel of highlights for Caleb Williams. Boomer.
So Boomer Sooner for both Jeff and Mike. Connor Riley, what do you think?
I was all set to pick Baylor this week. I love this Baylor team and what they're doing there. I think Dave Aranda, if Mel Tucker decides to stay at Michigan State, I think that's who LSU should go higher. Do you guys know who Chandler Morris is?
Do tell.
He is the son of former Arkansas head coach Chad Morris. He's the quarterback at TCU. He is, a 4-star, 3-star recruit, depending on the service you use. Last week against this Baylor defense, by himself, he rolled up 531 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now you're going to go face that defense against Caleb Williams. I like Oklahoma here because I think Caleb Williams is going to do similar things, even if Baylor may have been looking ahead there. And they do have the banks of the Brazos River behind them.
It's another example of a TCU team with a lame duck coach. Actually, in this case, Patterson's just gone all the way around, but continuing to play a little well, even without their head coach in place there. So good point there for the son of Chad Morris, who's done some nice things there for the Horned Frogs. By the way, the post Zach Evans there, I guess, in TCU there as well. Or is he still playing? Honestly, I'm not even sure. Whatever.
He's still on the team, but he did not play last week.
Okay, so there you go. An update on all of that. So the point here is Connor on the side of Oklahoma there too. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, they like the Sooners there as well. Not a huge margin, though. 68% do take Oklahoma against Baylor. Jeff mentioned the overall success straight up for Oklahoma on the road, but against the number, though, not quite faring quite as well. Failed to cover in each of the last 2 road games has Oklahoma, both those games in the Sunflower State, with Kansas, most recently Kansas State before that. So a little bit of trouble ATS for Oklahoma on the road, and not a great year against the spread overall for the Sooners, just 4-5 against the number thus far this year. But after a week off with a clear path towards the college football playoff ahead of it, assuming it can keep winning, I'm going to take Oklahoma with the number here. Little bit of a flyer for me on this. I have a sneaking suspicion the playoff selection committee doesn't think Oklahoma is very good. Now, the playoff selection committee may not know what they're talking about, but this is a chance for Oklahoma to maybe prove some folks wrong who doubted them this season. So given the fact they've got 2 weeks to prepare, I'll trust them to do that. Not a very big number here against a Baylor team that, not counting last week, is actually played pretty tough thus far this season. But the Sooners my pick there as well. Makes me a little nervous that everyone likes Oklahoma. This game shouldn't be that easy to pick, but nonetheless, we're in agreement thus far. Dar, you want to go with the flow and make it a clean sweep?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the flow. I'm gonna take Oklahoma here. Baylor gave up 450 yards to TCU last week, so Caleb Williams has to be looking at his chops, especially with 2 weeks off. Lincoln Riley's going to have a game plan to prepare for this. The line is a little fishy considering the past, I think, 3 or 4 years since Lincoln Riley's been there. They've always been more than a 2-touchdown favorite against Baylor. So something's kind of up with that, but I still think Caleb's kind of on fire right now. So I think he's just gonna torch him.
We go from the Big 12 to the Big 10, and I have to confess something here, admittedly, that I try to project what's going to be in the top 25, or use the college football playoff top 25 now that it's out. My assumption was going to be that Penn State was going to be a ranked team this week, and the Nittany Lions were not ranked. We're going to pick the game nonetheless. It's Beaver Stadium with Michigan coming into town. You don't have to explain why that's a big game. And Michigan, a 1-point favorite here on the road. Talk about point spread changes. This is likely a change from where this would have been as recently as even a few weeks ago. But Michigan, who got a controversial nod by the committee this week, being ahead of a Michigan State team that beat it head-to-head and outright just a couple of weeks ago, nonetheless going to Happy Valley there on Saturday as a 1-point road favorite. Mike, what do you think about Michigan and Penn State?
Well, there's no pressure on Michigan. They'll stay ranked ahead of everybody, even if they lose. So they know that the committee's on their side. They have high television ratings, and Penn State has just, to me, kind of fallen off since that Iowa game when their quarterback got hurt. Things turned quickly, and James Franklin might be changing agents. I like Michigan to win this game, actually comfortably. So I'm going to take Michigan and give the point.
So Mike Griffith on the side of the Michigan Wolverines. Jeff Sentell, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to use a word that my kids use often when they just want to relax and have a good Saturday. They call it chillaxing. I think Michigan will chillax here with Penn State. I know a lot of folks that they think that this is going to be a really good game nationally. I just see Michigan's had some offense. I do like Mike Griffith's editorial comments in the middle of that regarding rankings and records, but give me the Wolverines here.
Connor Riley, what do you think? A lot of love for a Michigan team favored on the road here at Beaver Stadium. What do you think about that?
I'm going to take it one step further. This is my stone cold lead pipe lock of the century of the week. I love Michigan here. They beat up on bad football teams. They've done that pretty consistently all season. It's kind of why I see what the committee is saying and why they ranked them at 6, even though you can't really agree with it, given Michigan State just beat them a week ago. And I think this Penn State team is a bad football team. So give me Michigan here. -1 on the road. It should be +1 on the road. I don't care. I love Michigan this week.
So split decision amongst Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, 55% on the side of Penn State. So almost an even split there on that. I don't think Michigan's a bad team necessarily. In fact, I told folks that on my own show after the loss to Michigan State that I didn't think this was the last time we'd hear from Michigan this season. But folks, sound the alarm. Be very careful. You can make a case that Penn State is the most undervalued team in the entire country right now. Mike Griffith touched on one of the reasons why. This is a team that's been greatly harmed by injury. Be very careful assuming that you know what a team is when it hasn't been playing in full strength. Also, they're being greatly dinged for a loss to Illinois, which, listen, it's still not a great loss, but Illinois is 3-4 in the Big Ten, 4-6 overall. They're not playing bad football here all the way around. And for a Penn State team that I told you thought would have been ranked in the college football playoff top 25 this week, I think should have been. This team that has a win against Wisconsin that looks like a pretty good win right now, has a win against Auburn, which looks like a pretty good win right now. This is a Penn State team that is on sale at a bargain in this game. Connor says it's his lead pipe lock to be on the side of Michigan here. I won't go quite that far with Penn State, but I like them a lot. This is actually one of the games this week that I feel pretty good about. I like the Nittany Lions here. simply because I think a lot of the country's forgotten about them. And I think that's a mistake. So give me Penn State. The flow, though, on the side of Michigan. Dar, you want to go with the flow with the Wolverines?
No, I like the Nittany Lions at home here. They've had an up and down year. Harbaugh let me down against Michigan State. He should have won that game. He let that game slip away. Michigan is 0-6 against the spread in their last 6 games against a team with a winning record. I think it's going to go to 0-7 after this week.
So one more game in the Big Ten that does truly involve 2 ranked opponents on Saturday and a fresh entrant into the top 25. That is Purdue in at number 19 this week after continuing a pretty remarkable run. No team in the history of college football has more wins against top 5 opponents while unranked than Purdue, getting another one of those last week there against Michigan State. But they find themselves in the top 25 this week, taking on Ohio State team that is obviously looking to show that it's better than what it looked the last couple of weeks. Certainly last week against Nebraska, the week prior to that against Penn State. By the way, there's that team again. But nonetheless, an Ohio State team trying to flex here a little bit as a 20-point home favorite. Mike Griffith, what do you think about Ohio State here minus the 20 against a team that's come to be known as the spoiler makers? What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, Ohio State's got too much talent for Purdue. They pulled a rabbit out of their hat last week against Michigan State with some really great football plays. But after an emotional win like that, things have a way of leveling out. And Ohio State's got some explosivity on the perimeter. So I'm going to take the Buckeyes to cover and give Connor that tip so he can follow along and take the Buckeyes also.
What do you think, Jeff Sintel, Ohio State minus 20?
Yeah, Rondale Moore, last time I checked, is not playing in this game. We'll remember the theatrics from him a few years back. This is a barometer game for me with the Buckeyes. I think if they make this number, they put up a 25, 30-point victory. I think they really have some sizzle to get in the Final Four of the college football playoffs. I like the Buckeyes. I like the way they're rolling with getting their receivers, especially their elite receivers rolling. Give me Ohio State here, fellas.
So that is Ohio State. Connor Riley, what do you think? Big number in Columbus.
First of all, Mike, if I were following your picks, I'd be in 4th place right now with, I believe, a below 500 record. And I'm clearly not that, as I am in first and have the best record of the picks here. Second of all, Jeff, you mentioned no Rondale Moore. Purdue also has a really great receiver in David Bell, who's been able to put up chunk yardage and do a lot this year. Third, I actually would like Purdue to maybe outright win this game, but the committee ranked them knowing they would take away Purdue's superpowers by no longer having them as an unranked team. But this Ohio State team, again, they've struggled to score in the red zone regardless of the opponent. This defense I still don't trust, and I think as we saw last week against Michigan State, this Purdue offense can put up points. So give me Purdue here plus the 20, even though this game is on the road.
So there you go, Connor Riley. That is a very bold pick. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers don't agree, though. 81% on the side of Ohio State. It's a big number, but I still got to take a flyer on the Buckeyes. I actually don't have a ton of reason why. I'm a little from a gambling standpoint, I'm a little nervous about Ohio State. From a fan standpoint, I'd love to see Ohio State struggle and lose. But this is becoming a little bit of a difficult Ohio State team to back. Connor mentioned this. Obviously, it's a top 5 offensive efficiency team, but a team that's outside the top 40 has been, from a defensive efficiency standpoint, not really matching that complementary on both sides of the football. But at a certain point in time, they're second in ESPN and SP Plus for the season. This is still a team that you got to think at a certain point is going to assert itself at home against Purdue. Seems like as good a time as any for that to happen. So I'll take a flyer on Ohio State. I don't feel great about this pick at all, but at some point in time, don't the Buckeyes have to look like the Buckeyes? Dari, you want to go with the flow and take OSU?
No, I like Purdue here. And, Ohio State has had the past 2 weeks the opportunity to look like a team that wants to be in the college football playoffs, but they've only won those games by 9 points each against way inferior teams. And here's the thing, there's some key stats going into this game that are some poor trends for Ohio State. Right now you have Purdue, who's 7-3 in their last 10 games against the spread when going on the road. Ohio State at home is only 2-6 against the spread in their last 8 home games, and they're only 3-7 against the spread against their last 10 games against teams with winning records.
Strong numbers all the way around. And I mean, honestly, you make me, rethink my pick. I'm going to stay with Ohio State, but you make a very compelling case for why this is not the kind of team that you certainly rubber stamp as a 3-touchdown favorite right now. Ohio State just hasn't been that thus far this season. One more game involving top 25 opponents. This one, a rare moment for the ACC to take center stage with this, or at least be on the stage, as NC State travels to Winston-Salem to take on a Wake Forest team reeling after a loss, and 113 total points scored last week, and the Demon Deacons lost to North Carolina. However, a little bit of a scheduling anomaly, Wake Forest remains unbeaten in conference play. Officially, Wake and UNC played a non-conference tilt last week, but this week, though, there will be implications for the Atlantic Division of the ACC with Wake hosting North Carolina State. So what do you think about Wake giving 2 at home against the Wolfpack on Saturday, Mike Griffith?
Yeah, big stage in ACC football is kind of an oxymoron, BA. But I'm going to take the Demon Deacons to win and cover against NC State in a game that we can all pretend to care about, but we really don't.
Jeff Sintel, what do you think? Wake Forest 2-point home favorite against NC State.
Yeah, everything about this game screams obtuse to me. It was obtuse that wasn't a conference game last week. It's obtuse that Wake Forest is still in the top 10 somehow. Give me the better defense in this one. I'm going to go with NC State. I think NC State, looking at stats, they only give up about 2 touchdowns, 16 points per game. Wake's probably somewhere around 30 by last count. I saw it. I'm going to take NC State in this one.
So that is Jeff Sintel. Connor Riley, split decision here amongst the scribes on this ACC tilt. Break the tie for us.
I'd love to be wrong here. I think this Wake Forest team is a lot of fun, worth watching, worth celebrating this season. But I think NC State is the better football team. They're going to play a physical brand of football. They're a better recruiting team than Wake Forest is. And I think you saw that show up last week against North Carolina. I think you're going to see it again. Give me the Wolfpack here.
71% of Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers on the side of Wake Forest, they like the points scored, and we're running late on time, so let me just cut to the chase here. The wrong team's favored here. People pay attention to the noisier team. That's Wake Forest offensively, but Dave Dorn and the Wolfpack here, the more complete team. Simply put, it's even on the road, it's NC State who should be favored going to Wake Forest there on Saturday. I like NC State a lot in this spot. Dari, however, the flow on this game is I'm sorry. That is actually the flow on NC State. You want to go with the flow and take the Wolfpack?
No, I'm gonna come and take Wake here to bounce back after a tough loss to the Tar Heels. One of the key stats for me, Wake Forest has owned NC State. They are 10-1 against the spread in their last 11 home games against NC State. So I'm going to ride that and their offense to get the win here by more than 2.
We'll turn our attention now back to the Georgia Bulldogs on the road at Tennessee on Saturday with a pretty hefty number next to the name, just given the fact that Georgia's such a strong defensive team. Total set at 56 for Dogs and Vols in the cold at Neyland Stadium. Mike Griffith, what do you think here?
Well, Tom Crean is 4-0 in home openers as the Georgia basketball coach, and they were able to score more than 56 points last night in beating Florida International. Kirby really doesn't like Tennessee, and I think that might be enough to get him to throw the football and get out of the prevent offense. I'm going to take I'm going to take Georgia and the over here. I think Georgia's going to put up a lot of points in Neyland Stadium.
So that is Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, 56 is the number.
Yeah, I don't think that football is going to be thrown around much, at least on Georgia's side. I don't know if Tennessee will ever have the ball. This kind of feels like a 38-13 game. I remember my math. I think this game's going to go under, fellas.
Connor Riley, 56.
I'm going to continue to play the most dangerous game. I'm going to take Georgia as a big favorite, and I'm going to take the under here. It's been good to me recently, and so I'm going to ride with the under here, even though I could very much see a scenario where Georgia scores 56 points on its own this weekend.
61% of Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers also on the side of the under. Dari, for me, the rubber is the under is a rubber stamp for me. You're talking about 4 or 5 weeks in a row of Georgia being back to being an under team once again after a long stretch a year ago where that was very close to a given. So until given a reason not to, even though I expect Tennessee to score some on Saturday, until given a reason not to, I'm still going back to the under again for Georgia games for the foreseeable future. Do you want to go with the flow and take the under?
Yeah, I'm going to take the under here. Georgia has gone under in their last 5 games, and 10 of Tennessee's last 13 that they played at home have also cashed in on under.
Great stat. That's a great stat. Obviously, kind of running contrary to what you might expect there. So fun week of picks here. Obviously, one of the main ways to make sure you also enjoy your weekend is If you have some sort of issue, your water heater goes out, something like that, trust RS Andrews. In many cases, they can replace it for you the same day. So go ahead and reach out today, get that thing fixed so you can be ready to go for a fun weekend. rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. Enjoy all the games this weekend. Picks from the SEC, from the other conference there as well. You can really tell the month of November is here because the slate is getting bigger with major implications for the playoff top 25 and the race for conference championships there as well. Also, big thanks to our friends at BetUS for providing the point spread data for us here today. Enjoy the games here this weekend. Best of luck with your own picks. We'll see you back here again next week at this same time for Go With The Flow, presented by RS Andrews. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody.